Story 1: The Darkness. This is a story from my childhood, one which I have not told anyone except for my wife. Just thinking about it still sends shivers down my spine. I grew up in a small house with just my mother. It was a nice little house with 2 bedrooms upstairs, a small living room and kitchen on the main floor, and a basement where I kept all of my toys. The basement had a small storage room in the back, lit by a single light bulb. It wasn't until I was 7 years old that I started to get scared to go down here. It was a dark, rainy night as I played with my Legos in the basement. Rainwater slowly dripped through the window and down the cement wall. It was cold down there that night, more so than usual. I Washington S wrapped up in my hoodie and a blanket as I played while attempting to build an airplane out of my Legos. I suddenly got a chill down my spine, followed by the overwhelming feeling of being hatched. I turned and looked behind me toward the dark storage room. Something drew my attention to the room, but I couldn't see what it was. It seemed darker than usual. I didn't think a room could get that dark, especially with the lights on in the room adjacent to it. It almost seemed like there was something in there drawing away all of the light, sucking it in like a black hole. I stared into the darkness at seemingly nothing until I saw something move. I didn't know what it was, but it seemed even darker than the room. I saw it for just a second before it disappeared. As it did, I could see light slowly start to trickle into the room. This terrified me, so I ran upstairs to the living room to seek comfort from my mother. When I told her what I had seen, she just told me that it was my mind playing tricks on me because of the heavy rain outside. I went to bed that night not thinking much about what had happened in the basement. I lay back in my bed and closed my eyes just like on any other night, and I fell asleep rather quickly. Although I fell asleep like it was a normal night, the night was less than normal. I woke up that night with the feeling of being watched. I opened my eyes to see nothing but darkness. I couldn't even see the light from the street light outside of my window. Thinking that maybe my blinds were closed, I looked across my room for the soft, green glow of my alarm clock, but it wasn't there. At that moment, I realized that this was a lot like the darkness I had seen in the basement, and that scared me. My fear doubled in an instant when I thought I saw movement in the darkness. In my terror from seeing that there was something in my room, I pulled my blankets over my head and screamed. In the midst of my screams, I heard my door open and the soft call from my mother. As she sat down on my bed, I slowly pulled my blankets off from over my head and looked around my room. The light had returned to my room, and I could now see the soft glow of my clock blinking at 2:17 a.m. and the light from the street light outside my window. With my blinds fully open, my mother asked me what was wrong, and I told her what had happened. Reassuringly, she told me that it was just a nightmare and to go back to sleep. She gently kissed my forehead and left my room, closing the door behind her. It was hard for me to fall asleep after that, so I just watched my clock slowly tick away the minutes. This went on for about 2 or 3 months, staying at this level of activity. Nothing more than the feeling of being watched in the darkness. However, that all changed on Halloween night. It was a typical Ontario Halloween night. Cold, windy, and rainy. I had returned home that night from trick-or-treating with my mom at about 8 o'clock and went down to the basement to play with my toys for a bit before bed. I could hear the rain tap against the basement and the wind whistling as it blew between my house and my neighbor's house. Something was unsettling in the basement at night, more so than usual. As I played, I thought I heard sounds coming from his storage room, but every time I looked there was nothing. This was nothing strange to me, as it's been happening for the last few months, so I continued to play. I played for about 10 a.m. in Utes when the power suddenly went out, and that's when everything changed. As soon as the power went out, I heard more movement from the storage room behind me. I immediately looked behind me to see a quick flash of red light and then darkness. As I stared, I could hear footsteps from the dark room, but I could see nothing. The footsteps slowly made their way toward me, the darkness getting darker as they approached, until they suddenly stopped. I moved my eyes around the room, careful not to move any other part of my body in fear that whatever this was would see me. I looked around the room, trying to see what this thing was, but I could see nothing. It was so dark I couldn't even see my feet. I wanted to run upstairs to the safety of my sir, but I was frozen in fear, so I didn't move a muscle or even breathe. I sat in silence, listening for whatever was in the room with me. I couldn't hear a sound, not even the rain on the window or the wind between the houses. As I listened, the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood up on edge, and I got chills down my spine, and that's when I heard it. A deep voice whispered into my right ear, "You will be mine, Robert." I instantly screamed and ran to the stairs, tripping on toys along the way. I made my way up the stairs and through the door to the living room, slamming the door behind me. I ran to my mother, crying, and she held me, not knowing what was going on. I told her what had happened, but she just told me that my mind was just playing tricks on me again. What I had heard as just the wind, but my mind exaggerated it because of the darkness. From that moment in the basement, no matter what my mother said, I knew that whatever this thing was, it was real. From then on, I refused to go into the basement alone. In fact, I didn't like going into the basement at all. The activity in the basement itself settled down a little bit because I was never alone down there after that incident. But I still had trouble sleeping. I would wake up at night with the feeling of being watched, to see nothing in my room but darkness. I would lay there staring into the darkness with my blankets pulled up to my neck, hoping there was nothing there, but after a few minutes I would hear that same voice again, "You're mine, Robert II." I would hear that voice. I would pull my blankets over my head and scream, causing my mother to run into my room, and every time she would say it was just a bad dream. This sequence would go on at least twice per week until August of 1998, when the activity escalated yet again. My mother had been dating her now husband for a while now, and we were preparing to move into his house. I was going to be on vacation for 2 weeks in Quebec with my grandparents as my mom moved our things into the new house. But what happened my last night in that house still terrifies me to this day. I had fallen asleep easily. Why, that night, excited to be leaving on vacation the next morning, but the rest of the night would not be so easy. I woke up again that night, this time to the sound of breathing. I opened my eyes to see nothing but darkness yet again. Thinking that my mother was in my room with me, I called out to her, "Mom." But what answered was definitely not my mother, as that deep voice yet again, "Your mother is not here. She can't help you, Robert. You're finally mine." I continued to stare into the darkness, thinking that it was my imagination. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see the silhouette of that dark figure standing at the end of my bed. I immediately pulled my blankets over my head and screamed, but my mother didn't come. I felt pressure on the end of my bed, as if someone was sitting on it. I screamed again. Suddenly, I felt something grab onto my ankle under the blankets and pull. I somehow managed to turn onto my stomach and grab the end of my mattress, but it only gave me a few seconds before it shifted and I was pulled right out of my bed. I continued to scream, louder than I had ever screamed before. Finally, I could hear my mother get out of bed and make her way to the door. Only this time, when she reached it, the door did not open. The entity continued to drag me toward the door as I continued to scream. I could hear my mother pushing against the door, trying to get it open without success as it dragged me across the carpet. I tried to grab onto anything that I could, but the only thing that seemed to work was the foot of my bed. I stopped as I took hold, and I finally stopped moving toward the door. I could feel the entity begin to pull harder, hard enough to lift my body off of the carpet. But I managed to hold on. As I fought the entity, I could hear my mother struggle with the door. It took my mother a good 2 or 3 minutes to finally get the door open. As the door fell wide open, light returned to my room, and I no longer felt the grip on my ankles, and I fell back to the carpet. I looked around the room, terrified. My room was a disaster. The sheets were in a ball. On the floor, my mattress was half off of my bed frame, and my bed was no longer sitting flush with the wall, but pulled off about 3 feet. I looked around for the entity, but it was no longer My mother held me tight as I cried on the floor, not knowing what happened, only thinking that it was a really intense nightmare. I spent the rest of that night in my mother's bed, but did not sleep. The next morning, I could see the rug burn on my arms and elbows from being dragged across the carpet. I looked at my ankles to see they were red and swollen, but harder to see were the little scratches along the top of my feet. That was my last night in that house, and I'm glad that it was. To this day, I do not know what this thing was or what it wanted of me, but then, king of it still scares me in my adolescent years, and even now that I'm in my mid-20s, I have what my doctor has only described as night terrors. I wake up in the middle of the night to see nothing but darkness, and as I stare into the darkness, I see a figure, even darker than the darkness around it. I still scream when I see the silhouette, the darkness. Now that I'm older, though, I have more control over my actions. I take a flashlight and shine it through my room, or I'll turn on the light switch. Many times I'll just wake up screaming, sometimes even running out of my room, with no idea why. I do not know if what I see is the same entity that stalked me as a child, or if it's just my imagination digging deep into my subconscious. But the entity still haunts me to this day. I just pray that whatever this is does not start going after my wife or our future kids. Story 2. Distorted warning signals. When I got the first one, I was literally seconds away from stepping onto the plane when a call from unknown blared from my cell phone. It was a ringtone I hadn't heard before, one I was pretty sure hadn't come with the phone. Normally, I wouldn't have stopped to answer it, but I was expecting a call about a job I had interviewed for the previous week. I took a deep breath in and accepted the call. "Hello? Do not get on the plane," a woman's voice, garbled and strange, as if her vocal cords had been shredded, and she was trying desperately to choke out speech. Despite the unnerving, fractured quality of her voice, her tone was insistent and eerily calm. When the call ended, I froze. I had always had a slight phobia of air travel, and something about this call just. There's no way I was about to get on a 7-hour flight now. I turned around and headed toward the food court. I'd just get another flight later in the afternoon, I figured. I watched from the airport Starbucks 3 hours later as every TV in the terminal lit up with the crash footage of the plane I should have been on. No survivors, not a single one. I tried to trace the call, so did the police. But there was nothing to trace. There was no evidence my phone had ever received a call around that time. They analyzed phone records, incoming and outgoing communication to my phone. Nothing. I wasn't making it up. I couldn't have been. That wasn't the only call throughout the years. They were few and far between, but always right, and I always listened. "Do not go on that blind date tonight." 5 months later, my would-be date was convicted of killing for women, all with my hair color and build. Found them in a shallow grave about 250 feet from the diner he offered to take me to. "Do not drive to the concert tonight." A teen-wheeler lost control and plowed into a line of cars. Every driver crushed, every driver killed. In the stretch of freeway I would have been driving down, no matter if I got a new phone. If I moved across the country, the calls would still come. I could almost feel the presence of whatever it was, whatever it is, watching over me. I imagined being at the bottom of the freezing ocean, still strapped into my coach section plane seat, or being in that mass grave across from the diner, or watching an 18-wheeler skidding toward my car, knowing death as imminent, and I'd get this tightness in my chest. I'd think about how thin that line was, how close I'd gotten. If I hadn't had a job interview I was waiting to hear back from, I'd have never listened to that first call, and that would be it. For me, it always felt like something was coming for me. But there was always this fractured, warped voice with these calls that ever seemed to exist after I heard them, self-destructing, warning signals, rotting away before my eyes. And I was alive. I had a bad feeling about this cruise. I had planned it as a girls' week out with some of my old friends from college, and was looking forward to a week in the tropics in the dead of winter. But part of me could almost sense that the call was coming. Maybe I watched Titanic one too many times, but there was a little nagging fear from the start. I hoped it would be fine, but I knew that if something was going to happen, I'd get the call. I know now, a week before I'm set to go on the cruise, after stepping into my apartment, after returning from dinner with a friend, I notice my cell as a message from unknown. They've never had to leave a message before. Haven't checked it all night, damn it. And I had really wanted to go on that cruise too. Well, Not worth whatever horrific fate awaited me in that cold, dark ocean. I click play message and feel my stomach drop as I listen to the voice sounding horrifically distorted, as if it emanates from a throat slashed to ribbons, crackling with more urgency than ever before. I look around my apartment as the voice on the phone repeats the same phrase over and over again. Do not come home after dinner tonight. Do not come home after dinner tonight. Do not see me home after dinner tonight. Story 3. The wolves of these frozen woods. I can't stand to be back here. This tiny, rural town I grew up in, it makes my skin crawl to see everything around me. I'm well into middle age now, but it's like this town has been frozen in time since I was a teenager. And the older I get, the more things that in childhood seemed warm seem to radiate a freezing cold, the more things seem to hide teeth and claws and menace. I'm standing in these woods, the ones across from the house I grew up in, and I fall back into memory so easily. Everything is frozen. Everything is the same, just a little more. It's like something's wrong with the daylight here. My brother James likes things from the woods, animals, birds especially. When we were children, we used to go out into these woods almost every afternoon, looking for them birds. We just watched them, and he was so amazed, so in awe of these creatures, he never even got too close, so gentle. He'd just look up at them, appreciate the fact that they were there, and then he met Billy and Michael and Peter, and then he started shooting the birds. My mind goes back almost 30 years. I feel like I'm right there. Like I'm right there. These woods will do that to you. I think back to that night. The first night that James, I'm sitting at the family dinner table. I am 17. I count the plates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count the chairs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count the bodies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's my brother? Where? James, my sister says he went out with his friends to the woods. She thought. My mother says she doesn't like him out after dark. 13-year-old boys should be home eating their dinner and not out in the woods at night. The food's getting cold as the air. Outside the house, still no James. It's getting late. It's getting later. No one's seen him. I breathe in and out and in, out and in. Hold my breath. Time crawls. No James. I walk to Peter's house. The wind is picking up. The night is black. No moon. No nothing. My sister thought he was with his friend Peter in the woods. In the woods, Peter said. We were running, laughing. We were in the woods and trying to catch rabbits. We were in the woods trying to shoot a deer. We were in the woods, but then we left the woods. He tells me we parted ways, and I went to baseball practice, and Billy went to the store, and Michael went home to his mother, and I don't know where James is, says Peter. I don't know. But he's not in the woods. The sheriff is called. They're all looking. Mother is sobbing. Father is drinking. My brothers and sisters are in and out, and in and out of the house. Look, help them. Father says, you're 17. You're a man. Almost. Look with them. Help them. But I'm stuck to the chair and I'm staring out at the trees. I'm looking out to the part of the wood I can see from our window, and I hope to God. I hope that he is not in the woods. He knows these woods. He knows them. One day gone, and I look out at the sun street, starting to bleed through the trees. No sleep, eyes open, mocking sun in the morning teased. One night gone, one night gone, one night gone, and no sign of James. The things in the woods. My mind cycles through the things in the woods. It cycles through everything soft and sweet, everything that eats plants, everything harmless before I think of the wolves. Oh God, the wolves! I stand out at night, yailing, staring at the woods, staring at the trees. Maybe if I squint my eyes, maybe if I look closer, I'll see him there, waiting. James, 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 I call, every James echoing out into the black night. Where has the moon gone? Dogs bark and wolves howl. No one stops my own howling. I yell until my throat is raw and red and slashed up inside, until I fall asleep in a bed of dying leaves that crackle as I shift in the night to days gone, taunting and following me all day, saying, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days, you'll never see him again, your broth. Ours eaten up, your brother's eaten up, the wolves will come for you, as well when I set. They comb through the woods, and I wait and wait, nothing, it's been too long. He knows these woods, he knows them, the wolves know them, too. Peter is helping us search. I ask him which way James was headed when he saw him last. Home, he says, he was headed home. Peter ducks behind a tree and starts crying. I know he's scared. I leave him there. I come back in 10 minutes, and his eyes are dry, and he's ready to press onwards. But we see no sign of James. That taunting sun dies on the evening of the 3rd day, and the moon comes out, the moon we haven't seen for days. In the darkness, I can just make out a shadow coming toward the house, the outline of a person walking strangely, limping, staggering. Yeah, Mies, James, is that you? No, no, not James. It's not James. It's a woman. The strange woman that lives in the decaying cabin on the other side of town. People come to her when they can't find things, rings or keys or books, and she closes her eyes and she draws a map, and the people always find their rings or keys or books. Sometimes people ask her what their futures will be when the why will die, and she says she doesn't know. She can't do that. She says all she can do is find things. Years ago, people say she saw 3 drowned children in her mind drown, head in cold, deep Echo Lake, all young, but she didn't know who, and she didn't know when, and she tried to warn the town. She tried to warn them all, but she didn't know who, and she didn't know when, and no one listened, and they let their children play in the lake, and the children were fine. And then one night, May Jackson, the preacher's wife, dragged her 3 children down to the lake, said she had the voice of God in her ear, telling her to bring her children to him. The next morning they found them, all 3 of them, drowned in that cold, deep lake. But the strange woman that lives in the decaying cabin on the other side of town says all she can do is find things. She staggers up to our doorstep and hands me a crudely scrawled map. The woods and an X deep in the heart of the woods. She walks away toward that moon as it crawls up the night sky, that same staggering, hunched movement. She turns back. Don't go alone. I race into the house and breathlessly ask how the map to my brother and father, to the sheriff. No words, we all tear through the woods, branches breaking, flashlights dying, running, 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 and I can't be our Eve, and don't let him be torn apart. and I can't breathe, and don't let him be, and don't let him be, and don't, and don't, and don't, and please, and no, 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 and oh my God, there he is, wolves. It wasn't wolves. Bullet through his chest. I didn't realize I had run ahead. And my father and brother and the sheriff are still running. And it's Jay. Used me, and it's only me, and I'm holding him. And everything is so cold, and the ground is red, 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 and lung punctured. He didn't when the doctor, Combs, he tells me James didn't die right away, catching rabbits, hunting deer, guns. Peter is crying in our living room. It was a mistake, he sobs. All the other boys had left. The gun went off. It was a mistake, and it hit him through the chest. And he said, get help. But I knew he didn't have much time, and I didn't want to go to jail. But he said, please help me, and I didn't know what to do. And he was already getting colder, and the ground was so red, and I didn't know what to do. And I left him there. Baseball practice. Peter left, and we went to baseball practice. He was in shock, and he left James there to die, to soak the ground blood red. And he picked up the baseball bat, and he left him there, and he ran the bases, and he left him there, and he hit the ball, and he left him there, and he left him there, and he left him there. I leave Peter there in the living room. My hands are shaking, and I can't be in that room. I can't. I don't know what I'd do to Peter, but I can't be in that room. And everything is red, and everything is cold. My brother, 13. My brother, gone. Something shifts in the trees next to me, and just like that, I'm back in the present, back in this strange, fading daylight. 30 years of time crashing back onto me like brackish waves. Nothing happened to Peter. Peter grew up, and Peter found himself a wife, and Peter had himself some children, and Peter found a job, and Peter bought a house, and Peter grew up. Peter gets to grow up. James doesn't. I get to grow up. I find myself a wife. I have myself some children. I find a job. I find a house. I grow up, and James is in the ground. I move away. I can't stand to be near those woods. I grow up, and I stop believing in people that can find things they've never seen by closing their eyes and drawing a map. But I think about that woman, and I think about James, and I think about Peter, and it brings me here, back to these woods, back to this place as the strange daylight dies through the trees. Wolves got him, I thought. Wolves got James. Before I knew about what Peter had done, I thought wolves got him. I wasn't entirely wrong story for the thing that will kill me. I grew up in a tiny town in Vermont. Tiny in terms of population, not size there were hug. Sprawling farms and wooded areas, but almost no people. More cows than people, which is standard for a lot of small towns in Vermont. So, clearly not the most fun in the world for a kid who was sick of freezing winters and awful, balmy summers surrounded by boring Vermonters that didn't have many kids my age. My only close friend was Tina, who was a year older than me. We spent almost all our time with each other, constantly dreaming about life outside of Vermont, The people in our town were strange folk, different than in other places. One thing I didn't realize about small towns until I moved to the city is how incredibly superstitious people in towns like mine could be. They believed in the strange, the paranormal. They believed in Luvia. Luvia was an older French Canadian woman who had moved to Vermont when she met her husband, and everyone in town thought she was a clairvoyant psychic. Even my own parents did. One day, my mother lost her wedding ring. She had looked around everywhere for it. They called Luvia, and she immediately told them it was under old, rotting wood. They looked in the backyard, where my father had been tearing apart a decaying piano he'd found. My mother had helped him one day. The ring was there, under old, rotting wood. After hearing a lot about Luvia from older townsfolk who seemed to think she was 100% credible, Tina and I decided to go see her one evening to try to find out whatever she could tell us about the future. I was skeptical, but it seemed like a fun thing to do as a joke. So we dropped by her house in the early evening, and she opened the door as we walked up the pathway to her house. Before we even had a chance to knock, Tina elbowed me hard in the ribs and whispered that Luvia was clearly a psychic. She sensed us coming to the door. I whispered back that it probably had more to do with her house being full of windows, and the fact that she probably saw us coming from a lunch way away. Either way, I started to feel strange the minute we got close to her. She was very, very old, very tiny, and kind of sunken eye sockets and sharp cheekbones and a sort of concave chest cavity. It was more than a little unnerving, but she smiled and was sweet to us, and I started to warm up to her. Nothing about her or her house screamed creepy psychic to me, just a well-dressed older woman in a cabin-style house. It looked like you'd imagine any typical grandmother's home doilies, knitting, family magazines, etc. We told her that we were interested in a clairvoyant reading and handed her about $20 that we had scrounged together between the two of us. She led us to her kitchen table and asked which of us wanted to go first. "What can you tell me about my love life?" Tina asked. Luvia had no crystal ball, tarot cards, or tea leaves. She just closed her eyes and sat silently for about 2 minutes. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Michael Carton." Tina stared at her for a few seconds until Luvia repeated, "Michael Carton, the man you're going to marry." "Michael Carton." Tina thanked her and repeated the name to herself a few times. "Michael Carton, Michael Carton, Michael Carton." Luvia then turned to me. "Whatever you can tell me, I'd like to hear," I said. "It doesn't have to be about my love life or anything." Luvia closed her eyes for a few seconds, but information about me seemed to reach her much quicker than her visions of Tina's husband. She looked straight into my eyes, grabbed my hands, and said, "The thing that will kill you is shedding its skin. The thing that will kill you is sharpening its teeth. The thing that will kill you is washing the blood off of its claws. The thing that will kill you is gathering skins. The thing that will kill you. You won't see it coming." The three of us sat there in silence for quite a while. I felt sick, shaken up. Luvia looked as if she wished she didn't have to tell me that. Is there anything I can do to stop it?" I asked. Luvia slid our money back across the table to us. No charge for the reading. Tina and I slunk out of Luvia's house quietly. We didn't say a word on the way back to our houses. Tina just found out the name of the love of her life. I got to listen to a horrifying cryptic message about my death. I was 12 years old. I was fucking terrified. When Tina left me at my doorstep, she tried to make light of the readings. How does she know who I'm going to marry? She asked. And it's not like some monster's going to get you, some skin-shedding, bloody, sharp. It's not like some monster's going to get you. It's not like some monster isn't going to get you. For years I looked for it, the thing that will kill me. I could almost feel it, sensed it just behind each car, swaying behind the trees at night, underneath the fresh snow, waiting outside my window, with every step I hesitated, every time I tried to sleep. I could almost see it. What had she said about its teeth? I looked out for sloughed skin, for blood, for skins, for hides, but I ever found it. When I was 18, I left for college in California to get far away from the snow and the cold and the thing that will kill me. I stopped sensing it everywhere. My heart stopped pounding whenever I walked alone at night. Maybe, whatever it was, it stayed in Vermont. Maybe it wasn't a thing at all. People in California laughed when I told them the story, and it stopped. Paid seeming real, just the ramblings of a tiny, ancient French-Canadian woman. It wasn't real. When I was 27, a wedding invitation came in the mail. Tina was getting married. This was the first I had heard of it. I was still in California and barely kept in contact with anyone from back east. It seemed like a past life. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Michael Carr, 10 and Tina. Wait, no, she had the name in her mind, Michael Carton, and she sought him out. It had nothing to do with Luvia. Her predictions weren't real. They couldn't be. Clairvoyants don't exist. It's ridiculous to think that kind of thing happens in the real world. I went to the wedding. Tina, Michael, and I laughed about the whole thing. The psychic knew. She predicted it. Of course she didn't. Tina and Michael decided it was nothing more than a funny story to tell their future children. Just tell us if you run into some beast with razor-sharp teeth that's gathering skins. Okay, then we'll think it's more than just a funny coincidence. I left the wedding as sure as I ever was that the thing the T will kill me wasn't real, didn't exist. I'd looked behind the trees. First time in a very long time. We were very different people than we had been as children, but we still shared more of a bond than we realized. She was happy, living in Vermont with Michael. She told me everything that was going on in our town, the population slowly increasing, the new schools they were building, the babies that were born, Luvia dying as the years went on. Her calls and emails got less and less frequent. She always seemed to be busy. Soon they tapered off completely. I missed her, of course, but I had my own life, and I could check in on my childhood home whenever I wanted. One winter, I came into town to visit my parents for the holidays and decided I'd swing by Tina's house. I normally never just drop by, but she was pretty bad about answering her phone, and I really wanted to see her. I pulled up to her and Michael's house. 2 cars were in the driveway, so I read they were both home. I walked up and rang the doorbell. Michael opened it. dressed in several layers and a large coat, as if he had just come in from the snow. He invited me inside. He looked very surprised to see me and asked if I had talked to Tina. Recently, I haven't actually, not in several months. Sorry for the invasion. I don't usually just drop by like this, but I was wondering if I could see her. Hiya, I figured you'd know, that you'd have heard. She left me a few months ago, just up and left. Hasn't spoken to me since. Oh God, I said I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He took off his coat and hung it on a coat rack by the door. Can I take your coat? He asked. I told him it was all right, that I wouldn't be staying long. I was just so shocked she'd do something like that. He was a really good guy. I'm sorry, I was about to get ready for bed. I've got an early workday tomorrow. Do you mind? He kicked off his shoes, pulled his sweater off, and headed toward his bathroom. I settled in, looked around their home. Of course, I don't mind. Do you know where she went? I don't, he yelled. Fro. In the bathroom, mouth full of toothpaste. She didn't call until after she was gone. That's awful. I'm sorry. He started flossing, and when he saw me looking toward him, closed the door for privacy. When I heard the shower water start running, I pulled out my phone, figuring I'd take this time to look through Tina's last messages to me to see if she gave any hint to where she went, any clue. My phone fell out of my hand as I grabbed it out of my bag, and I saw it drop beneath the couch. As I felt around under the couch for my phone, my hand hit something else, a massive clump of long hair. I pulled it out from beneath the couch. It seemed so strange, such a large mass of hair, brown hair, Tina's shade, hair with a piece of scalp still attached. The thing that will kill you is gathering skins. I turned toward the bathroom door. Michael was still showering. The thing that will kill you is washing the blood off of its claws, flossing, brushing. The thing that will kill you is sharpening its teeth, sloughing off his outer clothes, his shoes. The thing that will kill you is shedding its skin. Oh God, the thing that will kill me. I heard the water in the shower stop. Movements from inside the bathroom. I ran out the door, slammed the door, sprinted to my car, shaking, watching the door. My hands fumbled with keys, shaking. The door to the house opened. My car started. I drove. I didn't look back. I drove all through the night, through most of the next day, only stopping when I absolutely had to. I had no idea if he was following me. I had no idea what I had just seen. My heart didn't start beating normally again until I was 2 states away. I went home. This was months ago. I called the police. They investigated. Nothing turned up. They're sure she just left him, moved away. Maybe she did. Maybe she's far away, safe. Maybe nothing's coming for me. Maybe Michael's just a poor guy whose wife left him. Maybe it's nothing behind the trees, in the snow drifts, underneath the cars, outside my door at night, and the windows. Maybe it's nothing. Probably it's nothing. Luvia has been wrong before, hasn't she? The thing that will kill you. You won't see it coming. Story 5, Twist and Shout. It was late October in Brookhurst, Wyoming in the year 1965. I was 18, and I lived with my sister in an older barn house on the edge of town. I love that little town, especially in the fall. The deep oranges, bold yellows, and dense reds of the season would take over the huge blanket of once green trees that would cover almost all of Brookhurst. My sister and I both especially loved Halloween because of the simple fact is that we loved a scare every now and then. People of Brookhurst were seemingly more alive during that time. Even the trees would rejoice in the turn of the season and emotion of the people. I loved everything about autumn reconnecting with Brookhurst and the simple euphoria the town seemed to float in, except that one cornfield and that one scarecrow that sat in the middle of it. The poor little thing is so pitifully made, so sullenly placed. It wasn't exactly terrifying at first glance. But come to think of it, the thing aroused a disturbing feeling in my stomach every time I saw it. It had a faded gray sack that was tied with a routing rope as its head. On the sack were two little black dots far apart from each other as eyes. It didn't exactly have a mouth except for a tear that veered a little to the left that looked like it was on the sack before it was made to be the head of a scarecrow. It didn't have much of a nose either, but more like a tiny raised bump that was right in the center of the face. For its clothes, as it wore a ripped blue and gray flannel under a pair of tattered overalls with one misplaced patch lazily sewn on its hip. I remember that on its hands were a pair of faded dark blue field gloves whose fingers hung down sloppily. Every fall this scarecrow would appear in the same spot, with the same spaced-out look on its face. Every year the same question arose of who put it there, when it got there, or how it gets there. Hallow's Field, where the scarecrow sits, has been abandoned for 20 years ever since Farmer Hallow died. This had been our little town mystery, its key, and of funny, but also a bit sad, that the scarecrow just sits there. There's no corn to be protected, and there are no crows to be ridden. The townsfolk had always blamed it on the kids, but the kids blamed it on the adults. No one ever owned up to putting the scarecrow there, and I don't think anyone would have wanted to. I started to pay more attention to it as I rode my horse down T.H. the main road into town. I stopped at the edge of the field and looked at it. The wind blew through the dead husks surrounding the scarecrow. They rustled, but the scarecrow sat unnerved by the wind movement. It began to bother me. I guess it was the horrifying simplicity of its face, but it scared me so much after that moment. I continued and went into town, satisfied with a newly discovered idea. Ignoring everyone, I finished my errand and started back home. As I rode up the main street, the field came into sight, and so did that dumb scarecrow. When I arrived at the border of the street and where the field began, I got off my horse and marched into the field towards said creature on the wooden stake. As soon as I was a foot away, it smelled a strange scent of sweat and salt tea. His smell was unruly to my nose, so I covered it with my shirt as I began to untie the arms and legs from the stake. I put the thing under my arm and walked to the rotting barn beside the field car. The scarecrow felt unnatural. It had the weight of a dead dog, almost heavy, but not too much. I opened the door to the barn as it revealed the same aroma of the scarecrows. My eyes searched for something useful I could hide away the scarecrow with. They eventually found a loft and a beam that supported a broken part of the roof. I went up the ladder, hoisting the scarecrow on my shoulder, and slammed it down at the base of the pillar. I took out the rope that I bought at the store as my little errand and tie the thing to the column. Satisfied, I started my way down the ladder and to the field. I locked the barn door with chain that I had also brought. As I mounted my horse, a feeling of relief overcame me. It's not so much as that I was scared of the scarecrow, but it was the fact that it bothered me so much, and I probably wasn't the only one glad that it was gone for the time. 2 days came and went, and every time I passed Hallowd's field, I smiled warmly to myself. April, what happened to that ugly thing over there? My sister asked as we pasted the field one day. I told her that I didn't know, and I was glad it was gone, and she agreed. After an hour at the Halloween store, we began to drive home. I turned on the radio, enjoying some Beatles as I contently kept my eyes on the road. "Ah, that scarecrow is back," I slammed the brakes and turned my head to the field. My eyes soon met the familiar black dots of the scarecrows. My sister, smilingly and staring out the window, was completely oblivious to my conflict with that Crete. I sighed and laughed, suggesting that someone had made another one just for Halloween that was in 2 days, and I really wanted to believe that, too. When we arrived home, I told my sister to start decorating the living room as I couldn't because at the time I told her I needed to go to the grocery store. But in the back on my head I saw the empty stare of the scarecrow sitting on he wouldn't pull. I drove over to the field, an axe in my back seat, my mind being strangely calm and seemingly unaware of what I was planning. I arrived at the field and stormed into the field, the corn husks slapping at my side. I approached the scarecrow and swung the axe, cutting the head clean off. I hacked off the base of the wooden stake, and the body fell to the ground as I struck it over and over and over. Completely enraged, I even destroyed a few husks around it. After my episode, my adrenaline stopped, and I started towards my car. Not even looking back at what I had done, I drove flushed of any emotion, and went into my house with a painted-on smile. "Okay, Lucy, let's start decorating." I stormed into the house and clapped my hand, slightly scaring my sister. Then I started to play the Beatles as we hurried around the house, hanging ornaments on everything there was. As my sister went to fix up the stairs, the night had set in. After that, we started to clean the booze. Around 10 or 11, we started to play a board game, still enjoying the repetition of John Lennon's voice in the song Help. As I rolled the dice, a shrill neigh escaped the barn house. Lucy looked at me with a worried brow, and I got up to go turn down the music. I whispered, and she ran, turning the knob of the record player until the sound mellowed. I stood staring out the screen door that was pitch black from the night outside. I grabbed a flashlight and a first aid kit and went out the screen door. I ran to the barn, opening the door slowly, trying not to startle my horses. Everything was silent and calm. I ran the light over their legs and faces to check for injury. After a moment of surveying, I started to hear a minuscule suckling coming from behind me. I turned around and flashed the light in the direction of the sound. I heard a little rustle, and I raised the light a bit higher. It revealed a ripped flannel shirt and tattered overalls. Almost involuntarily, my flashlight rose to the thing's face, a faded gray sack. It all happened so fast. But its eyes weren't the painted black dots they used to be. They were different. Instead, They were like black inky beads that rested on top of the surface of the sack. They glistened in the white light of the flashlight. I remember the mouth. Instead of the harmless little tear, there was a perfect small circle with little blade, like teeth with small drops of blood pooling at the corners. I screamed and it leapt. I dropped my flashlight as I heard scurrying all around as I fumbled in the dark to retrieve my light. Instead of finding my light, I found the butt of my shotgun that I had from 2 years ago, and I had to put down my calf. Grabbing that and soon finding my flashlight, I searched for the scarecrow. Again, I moved the light all around the barn until I came to the window at the very top of the barn. There it was, hooked to the wall, head upside down, with those beady eyes staring at me. From its perfect circular mouth dropped a little tongue that was that of a bat. It twisted its head. It gave me a slow, deep-throated, rolling click before dashing out the window like a spider. I shot at it, thanking God it was still loaded, but no prevail. I began to run to my house before it could get to my sister. Suddenly, Joe H.N. Lennon's voice sang loudly, "Well, shake I tee up, baby, now." Just as Lucy screamed, and the light in the kitchen flickered off, I kicked my screen door open and stood quietly as Mr. Lennon hollered, "Come on, come on, come on, baby, now." My fingers eventually found the light switch, and the room illuminated a scene of a very frightened Lucy. The lamp swung harshly back forth as I scanned the room for the teeth thing. From behind me arose the clicking. As I swung around, it landed on the ground next to me, and I shot at it. Barely skimming the side of its head, it tried to stand up, looking like a knotted-up marionette. It hulked towards me. Lucy continued to scream as the Beatles played on, and I fumbled to reload. It reached for my foot with clumsy fingers and started to pull me boo. Before it could I joust it with the butt of my gun. It screeched and fumbled backwards in a pain as I rushed over to my sister. I told her to run upstairs, but she wanted to stay. Not in the mood for arguing. I allowed it and gave her directions as I scanned the counter for anything that was pain-inflicting. The butcher knife looked like gold as I grabbed it and threw it at the scarecrow. It missed. Completely, I got up and ran for the stairs, followed by the scarecrow. My sister screamed and headed for the door, catching the scarecrow's attention. The creature loped after her. Taking I sloppily shot it. It whined like an injured horse as I fired again, completely stopping the whining. My sister stood behind the door and looked at me with Joe. I motioned for her to sit, quiet as I raced down the stairs to pick the scarecrow up. I dragged it into the backyard and ordered Lucy to bring me a match as I piled up wood and dry grasses around it. I lit the pile on fire and watched the dead scarecrow become engulfed in the flames. I held my sister close as we watched the flame die down. Throwing water on the parched area, the sun began to rise, creating a mellow pink and orange sky that quickly calmed our nerves. We went into the house and passed out on the couch. In the morning, I awoke and dressed for school, a completely normal morning, with no mention of the night before. I made my sister breakfast and we headed to the car. We approached the main road into town. My sister asleep, the field came into focus. Right in the center, so pitifully made, so sullenly placed, completely unscathed, was that scarecrow. Story 6. They came from the sea, alien invasions. It's been so overdone, it's turned into a never-ending cliché. There are hundreds of films. I've watched them all, loved them all. Now they just make me sick. The pickup I'm driving shakes as I brake. The ABS is stuck on due to an internal computer malfunction. I pull to the side of the road, looking down a small cul-de-sac. The house is vacant, windows broken, as the empty darkness inside stares back at me. Most of the houses are missing their front doors, scratch marks littering the outsides. I pull up to a house, its red door hanging from one rusty hinge. A basketball hoop lies in the front yard, decaying into the soft ground I use to live here. I close my eyes as instants of my life dash behind my lids, floating somewhere in the tiny space of time before the world grew so dark, so cold, and so empty. A faint music fills the air and it draws my attention. It's an ice cream truck, the same one I once used to race to when I had heard its lilting song, money crumpled in tiny clenched fists. The speakers are wheezing the old song as a tea respins lazily in the summer breeze. I hum the tune softly to myself. Singing has always calmed me when I'm nervous. I check the mirrors before cautiously opening the doors, my eyes scanning for movement as I tug the shotgun from the space behind the driver's seat, clicking it open to check that it's loaded. Papers from overturned trash bins flutter against my feet as I make my way to my house, making sure not to touch the door, lest it creak and alert anyone or thing to my presence within the silent universe of my childhood. I move across the muddied, white tile sea, lightly pausing as I place my foot on the first step. I've snuck out enough times to know that only the fifth and eighth steps squeal when you press on to them. I survey the first two-bedroom. As their occupants, my parents and grandmother, long since gone, I move to the old dresser in my parents' room, my mother's perfume resting upon its smooth surface, the only thing untouched in the room filled with splintered furniture and torn clothes. I lightly trace my finger along its glassy surface, the amber fluid gently swirling as I do. My palm closes over it before I comprehend the action, bringing it to my pocket before letting it sink to the bottom. Out of the corner of my eye, I catch the colored beads in my room swaying, rattling together. I shoulder the gun, heart beating against the confines of my ribs. I fight the urge to call out. It would do no good. My parents wouldn't hide from me, and if it was one of them, God, I was dead. I slowly make my way past the bathroom, its door missing, shore curtain ripped and laying upon the floor. Shakily, I part the beads with one, then two, then three fingers, making the space just large enough to fit through. They part with ease and I replace them soundlessly. I'll only get the decency of one shot before it will overtake me. I see something move in the corner behind him. My bed, my childhood sheets are ripped, and my lamp is laying on the floor still on. The silhouette of the broken furniture makes it hard to focus on the movement emanating from behind the mattress leaning against the wall. The hammer of the gun ticks into place, the shattered glass beneath my boots crackling with each step. I swallow the insurmountable lump that has congregated in my throat. Tears sting in my eyes, even after everything that has happened, all that I've witnessed. I am still terrified of death. My hand touches the exposed foam of the mattress, pulling slightly as I steady my breathing. In one fluid motion, I throw the mattress aside, mustering more strength than I could ever achieve without the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. A hissing noise tears through the room as I pull my gun up, tripping over the chair that used to sit at my desk and tumbling toward the ground, my head hitting the missing half of my bookcase. I stumble to my feet, Wattower, whirling around and fumbling with the trigger before I see what it is I am faced with. A small cat stares at me, back arched and teeth glinting, its tail straight in the air. The slits of its eyes widen before jumping through the broken window of my bedroom and disappearing onto the roof. Laughter immediately peals from me as I bend forward, the gun resting in the crooks of my elbows as I cover my face. It doesn't stop for a good few minutes before I regain my composure, sitting on the mattress now in the corner of my room. With tear-stained cheeks, I turn my attention to the gray sky below and the broken glass, my stomach turning in hatred. We were always so focused on the sky, building large machines to shoot radio waves into the dark abyss just outside our reach, expecting an answer to the thousands of broadcasts that littered the darkness. It was the fad of the times, a never-ending search to appease our human need to not be alone in this expanse we call the universe. How foolish we were, turning our attention to other worlds when we had failed to adequately explore our own. I suppose we learned our lesson. It began on a brisk September morning. The bodies lit, nearing the shores, thousands of them covering every beach, lining the sand in neat rows. They had all drowned. Men, women, and children called by some unnamed force deep into the water before our hauling back in with the morning tide. Lifeless and bloated, the pictures were plastered on every media platform available. Every dorm room at my tiny college echoed with warnings from authorities to stay clear of all oceans. It took only a few hours before the first bodies rose, their faces covered in a thin layer of excess skin. They controlled everything in a matter of days, posting onto our websites, taking control of television networks. Whatever they were, they spread quickly, all contact with them ending in infection. They claimed to be our makers, our real gods. They had made us in their image, and now they were here to take that image back. There was no why for the invasion, no justifications. But, as my father always said, not every question has an answer. No. They had taken over nearly everyone. Cities were left to ruin and suburbs fell apart at the seams. Sitting on my mattress, I recall why I've come. My family, I had managed to escape the St. Wave, being away at school and deeper toward the center of the country. My parents and grandmother did not have my fortune. I stand slowly wiping the sweat from my brow. Everyone had said that I was crazy for going towards the shore of the cities. There were wastelands filled with memories of the great empire we had built, now rotting into the concrete on which it stood. How could I have not gone? This was my family. I couldn't abandon them, even if it meant going to the very source of the invasion. I make my way back down the stairs, searching the living room before moving into the kitchen, and then the basement. Part of me is relieved that I don't find them there. An extra layer of skin stretched over their faces as they sat, staring at nothing. I had only SE, and a few had never up close. If you were that close to one of them, you usually didn't live to tell of the experience. I move into the family room. The TV is smashed into the fireplace. making it appear as if some sadistic version of Santa Claus had delivered the broken present, shards of glass resting on the dark wood. A soft rustling noise draws my focus from the destroyed room to just outside the large glass windows, still intact in the yard. There are nearly a dozen figures, their bodies slightly shifting from side to side. Katie, the voice is a raspy whisper, but certainly recognizable. I hold my breath, water spilling from the corners of my eyes, rolling over flushed cheeks, dead. My voice wavers as I speak, losing confidence as I open the screen and step onto the patio. You've come home. The figure of my grandmother moves forward, the light skin over her features stretching as she smiles beneath the layer of flesh. I cover my mouth with my hand, sobbing. Don't be afraid, sweetie. It's just us. We've come to welcome you. My father moves forward as well, arms opening to embrace me. Stay back, I shout, racy, NG the gun shakily and loosely aiming it in the direction of what was once my father. He pauses mid-step, turning his head to the side like a confused dog before slowly lowering his arms to his sides. I was hoping you wouldn't be so obstinate. You were always so like your mother. The mass of faceless figures part and something stumbles forward before falling to the ground. My mother is tearing at the white layer, partially obscuring her face, covering her eyes. Her favorite sundress was stained with grass and blood, fingernails raw and bleeding. I retreat backwards, falling against the side of the house full. Our support. She be all right, baby. My grandmother moves to stand next to my father. Soon she see that we're going to be a family again. She just needs to see her little girl agree to. My hands loosen on the gun. I can't shoot them. I just can't. They're wearing their clothes, speaking in their voices. My mother wails from the grass, crawling towards me, on instinct. I reach for her hand, our fingers almost touching before she stops. A gentle tremor in her fingertips. Katie, she asks, her voice nothing like the harsh rasps of my father and grandmother. I stifle a cry, my body shaking as I wipe my eyes with the back of my hand. Yeah, Mom. It's me. I'm here. She turns toward me, her voice low. It's not them, but you won't win. It's not them. I love you. You'll be okay. I clutch the gun with both hands, crying into the middle of the barrel. The smell of gunpowder filling my nose. I never wanted this. I can't say it. Her voice breaks as she trails off, her hand falling to the soft grass as she grips it tightly, knuckles white. Do it. Do you understand? Do it. We won't win, she says, voice straining with tears she can no longer shed. I remain still as she speaks, the film finally beginning its final descent. Covering her mouth entirely, she starts, suddenly before falling limp, convulsing at my feet. As she tries to pry the skin from her mouth, I stagger away, too afraid to touch her, too afraid to save my own mother. We finally found her in the shed an hour ago. My grandmother has inched closer, her hands up in supplication. My gaze turns toward the tiny barricaded barn, a hole gouged in its side, the splintered wood around the opening giving it the appearance of a gaping mouth, teeth bared. Such a needless struggle. We're simply making the world better, filling it with unanimity. I wipe my eyes again, tears blurring my vision. We just want you to be a part of this new world. You can come with us and it will be painless. We promise. My grandmother offers her hand to me, standing so close that I can see her eyes behind the thin sheen. I look up at her, something in my chest pulling me closer, luring me in. Okay, I whisper, pulling myself to my full height as I look to my mom, lying in the grass, blood seeping from behind the white mask that now covers the face I'd seen 1,000 times. I'm gonna do it, Mom, I whisper, turning to face my grandmother. I'm gonna do it. I slide the gun through my hands, tapping the end with my finger. My eyes close as I take in the last few memories of my childhood home. Enjoying the simplicity of the bygone days, I hardly feel the gun sleep between my teeth, the tangy metal permeating my mouth, nor do I hear the shot that rings through the air. Story 7. Carnival Burgers. As many college students do, I practically lived off fast food and pizza delivery during my years as an undergraduate. I went to a school in my hometown, so lucky enough for me I didn't have to live on campus and suffer through the cafeteria on a daily basis. But nonetheless, my eating habits usually involved a lot of things fried in grease and covered in cheese. Of course, back in my early 20s, I had the metabolism to handle it. Now in my late 30s, I have sworn off fast food forever, yet, before you praise me for my healthy lifestyle, please understand I don't do it for my health. I lived in a small apartment back in those days, a typical student dwelling adorned with garage sale furniture and movie posters. It was a humble place, but it was inexpensive, so I didn't have to get a roommate, and in a great part of town surrounded by shops, staying in restaurants. Since my apartment was on the bottom floor, it wasn't uncommon for me to come home from time to time with advertisements taped to my door or hung on my doorknob from local bus. In essence, I would often find coupons and take-out menus and buy. Now I had amassed quite a collection. I was familiar with just about every restaurant in my neighborhood. I knew which ones delivered and which ones didn't. I knew which ones stayed open late and which ones were fast or slow or overpriced. I guess you could say I ordered out far too often. One night, as I was studying for an exam in the late hours of the night, my stomach began that all too familiar rumbling that had so many times before disrupted my ability to concentrate. As usual, I had been so wrapped up in preparing for the finals that I had forgotten to eat dinner, and as usual, I would resort to some late-night delivery. It was approaching midnight, so I knew a lot of my regular places would be closed by now. Especially being a weeknight, I shuffled through the collection of take-out menus in the kitchen drawer, trying to decide who to call. The only places that delivered this late were pizza joints, and I just wasn't in the mood for pizza, not again. I was about to give up and just dial the nearest pizza place when I came upon an advertisement I hadn't seen before, or at least I didn't remember having seen before. It was just a square piece of glossy paper that looked as if it had been torn from a magazine or one of those inserts they put in the newspaper. Strangely, I didn't remember having torn this out, but then again, I had been in a fog of constant studying for nearly 2 weeks, so perhaps I had saved this and had just forgotten about it. The ad featured a cartoonish clown mascot holding balloons. Beside him was a comic-style speech bubble with the words Carnival Burgers. Now open until 3:30 a.m. We deliver. Beneath the speech bubble was a telephone number. I had never heard of Carnival Burgers before. Was it a new place? I had reservations about ordering a burger by delivery, but I thought, why not? I mean, bad do you have to be to mess up a burger? I dialed the number. It rang only once before a voice picked up on the other end. Thank you for calling Carnival Burgers. Would you like to try our special use burger? The voice sounded almost electronic, like it was pre-recorded. No thanks, I said. I'd like to place an order for delivery. Excellent. I would be happy to take your order, sir, the electronic voice replied in a far too upbeat manner. What would you like? I'll take a hamburger with cheese, pickles, lettuce, onions, and tomatoes, a side of fries. Would you like mustard, mayonnaise, or our special house sauce? Mustard, please. Excellent. Your order will arrive shortly. Thank you for calling Carnival Burgers. He line then disconnected. I figured the person on the other end must have accidentally hung up. I hadn't given them my address or my payment information, and the voice hadn't given me my total. I dialed the number again to complete the order. This time it just kept ringing. I let it ring for what felt like a solid 5 minutes. When no one answered, I hung up and dialed again. The same thing happened. The phone kept ringing. I thought maybe they were busy, which would have been odd being so late in the middle of the week. But maybe their burgers were just that good, and maybe I had just gotten Luke. Getting through the first time, doubtful. I tried one more time. Finally, after about the third ring, the line picked up. The same electronic voice spoke, but this time it sounded slower and deeper, like the recording had been slowed down. Thank you for calling Carnival Burgers. Would you like to try our special house burger? No thanks. I actually called a little while ago. I think the line was disconnected. I never gave you my address. No worries. Jake, the slow, electronic voice replied. Your order is on its way. Click. I never gave them my name. I was suddenly hit with a wave of confusion mixed with uneasiness. My logical brain began to weave a scenario in which they could know my name without me having given it to them. Maybe I had ordered from this place ace before and I just didn't remember. Maybe they had some sort of number recognition software on their phone system so that repeat customers would be displayed on a database or a caller ID of some sort. Maybe that's also why they didn't ask for my address. Perhaps it was already on file from a previous order. Or maybe I did give them my name, and I was just mistaken thinking I didn't as much as I wanted that explanation to make sense. I knew I had never ordered from them before. I can be absent-minded at times and forgetful, but not that forgetful. I had never heard of the restaurant before, but I did have that ad in my drawer. I decided the most logical answer was the best one, and that I surely must have ordered from them before. Despite having talked myself into this conclusion, I still felt uneasy as I waited for the knock on my door. I couldn't focus on my studying. I turned on the television to break the suddenly overwhelming silence of my apartment. I flipped through the channels. Being a broke college student, I couldn't afford cable, so my late-night TV choices consisted of infomercials, religious programming, and talk show reruns. I settled on some trashy talk show where the host was telling people who was and who wasn't the father when the TV signal was cut in with static. A commercial popped onto the screen. It was snowy, and the sound quality was poor. A clown, like the one in the print ad, danced in front of a small building with a sign on it reading Carnival Burgers. the same electronic, overly peppy voice SP. Oak, come to Carnival Burgers, where the fun never stops. Now offering delivery, a phone number flashed on the bottom of the screen. The static dissipated and the screen returned to normal. I turned off the TV just as the T.V clicked off. There was a knock on my door. I hesitantly approached. I peeked through the peephole to see a clown, balloons in one hand and a paper bag with H. Carnival Burgers printed on it in the other. I gulped, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The clown smiled and said, "That will be $8.66, please." It was the same electronic voice from the phone. I pulled a $10 bill out of my back pocket and handed it to him. "Keep the change," I said, trying to mask my nervousness. "Thank you. Enjoy your order and please call us again. Next time, try our special house burger." The clown handed me the paper bag. I took the bag and thanked him. He stood there an uncomfortably long time, and there was an awkward period of silence. He just stared at me before I slowly closed the door. I thought that maybe I should have asked him how he knew my name and address, but I let it go. I waited a moment and then looked out the peephole. He was gone. I had been so hungry earlier, but now I hardly wanted to eat. I opened the bag and found nothing unusual inside. It was just my order, just a hamburger with cheese, pickles, lettuce, onions, tomato, and mustard with a side of fries. It was warm and smelled good. I felt my uneasiness diminish and my hunger return. I ate the burger and fries, and it was actually quite decent. It wasn't the best burger I had ever had, but certainly not terrible. After eating, I studied a little while longer before crashing at about 2 a.m. A few days later, it was the weekend, and I was driving home to my parents' house to spend the weekend with them. A couple of days of my mom's home-cooked meals and my old, comfy bed was just the thing I needed before finals week. They lived in town, so it wasn't a long drive, and I liked to visit when I could. As I was driving, I came across some road construction. I followed the detour signs to an off-road that I was unfamiliar with. I was aggravated, but as I said, it was a relatively short drive, so a small detour wouldn't make much of a difference. The detour guided me into an old residential neighborhood. There weren't many businesses, just old houses, a small park, and then there it was on the corner of an intersection. It was the building I had seen in the television ad. Carnival Burgers. I pulled into the parking lot and stopped. It was certainly the same building, but unlike the one in the ad, it was old and run down. The painted sign was faded and covered in dirt. Some of the windows had been broken out and replaced with boards. It looked as if it had been abandoned for years. I got out my car and peered through one of the windows. Inside were booths and tables, and sheeted with dust. There were cracks in the walls and cobwebs draping the small amount of furniture still left inside. In one corner was a plastic statue of a smiling clown holding a chalkboard menu with the now barely legible words, "Ask about the special house burger." I felt weak in the knees and a pain in my chest. This couldn't be the same place. Once again, my logical me and began to rationalize the situation. This was obviously just an old, abandoned location. The restaurant has moved and reopened somewhere else. There was no now located at underscore sign, but that had to be it. I got back in my car and continued to my parents' house. Later that night at dinner, I asked my mother if she had ever heard of Carnival Burgers. My parents had lived their entire lives in the town, so if anyone would know about it, they would. When I asked her, she told me, "Oh yeah, the old burger joint. It was shut down a long time ago, they said, for sanitation reasons. It was actually a kind of big deal when we were kids. We all loved going there. Sure, it was kind of a McDonald's knockoff, but it was fun. They had this clown that would give out balloons." "What was his name?" my father cut in. "Just Rio, because of that weird voice of his. Some sort of electronic voice box. I thought it was creepy. I thought he was funny. I was sad when they closed it down." My mother said, my father continued, "They said it was for uncleanliness, but the rumors are that it shut down because of the disappearances." He looked over his glasses and spoke in a melodramatic tone for effect. "Oh, those were just stories the older kids told us to scare us." "What stories?" I asked. My father replied, "They said a lot of people in the neighborhood started going missing, and the only thing the cops could find they had in common was that each one had ordered delivery from Carnival Burgers on the day they disappeared. Even weirder was their lines had ordered the same thing, the Special House burger." I decided not to tell my parents about my experience. I have never eaten fast food since.